My blood turned to ice when I saw the man who destroyed my life 5 years ago standing at my daughter's engagement party, charming everyone with that same devastating smile that had fooled me when I was a grieving widow. I dropped my champagne glass and it shattered across the marble floor with a sound like my breaking heart. Every guest turned to stare, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the ghost from my past. If you're watching this, make sure to hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Ellen Smith. Most people call me Ellen. And at 62 years old, I never imagined my own daughter's engagement would drag me back into a nightmare I thought I had buried forever. But sometimes, fate doesn't let you run. It forces you to fight. The sound of the glass shattering still echoed in my ears as silence swept through the hall. People froze with drinks halfway to their lips, whispers rising like a wave about to crash. My daughter, Hannah, rushed over, her perfect engagement smile faltering into annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. I couldn't speak. My eyes stayed locked on him. Michael, the man who had turned my life upside down. 7 years ago, I had been a grieving widow with a broken heart and 2 children to raise. My husband, Tom, had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me to figure out finances, bills, and survival. That's when Michael came into my life, smooth, sympathetic, charming in all the ways a lonely widow craved. He offered comfort, companionship, even financial advice. And then he stole everything. I trusted him with my savings, the small inheritance Tom had left, and the future I was desperately trying to hold together. Within 6 months, he drained my accounts, maxed out credit cards in my name, and vanished. The police said men like him were ghosts. They used fake identities, charmed women, and left them in ruins. It took me years to rebuild, years of humiliation, working late nights, borrowing money, scraping by. And now, there he was, standing in a tuxedo, holding my daughter's hand, smiling like the devil in human skin. My daughter followed my gaze and frowned. "Mom, what's wrong? You're embarrassing me." I grabbed her wrist so tight she winced. "Hannah, who is that man?" She pulled away and laughed nervously. "That's Daniel, my fiancé. Mom, don't start. I told you not to come if you were going to make a scene." Daniel. He called himself Daniel now. I almost choked. He glanced at me then, his eyes flickering with something dangerous, a flash of recognition. But instead of faltering, he smiled wider, raising his glass as though to toast me from across the room. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was real. My daughter had fallen for him, the same predator who had destroyed me. Hannah's voice was sharp. "Why are you acting so weird? Do you know him or something?" My mouth opened, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell her? How could I explain that the man she loved, the man she planned to marry, was a liar, a thief, a con artist who preyed on vulnerable women? If I blurted it out here in front of everyone, she'd think I was jealous, bitter, insane. And he knew that. He was counting on it. The engagement party carried on, music swelling again, laughter resuming. But I stood frozen in the corner, watching him glide from desk to guest. He had them all under his spell, his polished manners, his expensive cologne, his rehearsed charm. And then I realized my daughter didn't invite me to meet him before this moment. She had avoided introducing us. Why? Because he made sure of it. He knew the risk. He knew I could expose him.
When Hannah insisted I not come to the wedding, I had felt a sting of rejection. Now I understood. He was trying to cut me out of her life completely, just as he had isolated me years ago before draining me dry. My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of a table. Rage boiled inside me, but so did fear. If Hannah chose him over me, I could lose her forever. That night, after the party ended, I sat alone in my small kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. My daughter had left with him, her eyes full of love for the man who had destroyed my world. And I realized something painful but clear. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about saving my daughter before it was too late. But I couldn't go to the police. He had covered his tracks too well, and Hannah wouldn't believe me without proof. So I made a choice. I was going to get close to him, play his game, smile, nod, and act like the silly, harmless mother he thought I was. Let him underestimate me. And when the time came, I'd rip his mask off in front of everyone, including my daughter. I poured myself a glass of wine, the bitterness of it burning my throat, and whispered to the empty room, "You destroyed me once, Michael, but this time, I'll destroy you."
The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, not from the wine, but from the weight of last night's discovery. My daughter Hannah was engaged to Michael, though he now called himself Daniel. The same man who had left me bankrupt, humiliated, and gasping for air 7 years ago. But this time, I wasn't a grieving widow desperate for companionship. I was stronger, and I wasn't going to let him sink his claws into my daughter. I called Hannah around noon, pretending to be cheerful. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry about last night. The glass slipping out of my hand, it startled everyone. I think I embarrassed you." She sighed on the other end. "Yeah, Mom, you did. Daniel was so confused. You really need to work on not making everything about you." Her words stung, but I bit my tongue. This isn't about me anymore. It's about saving her. So I smiled through the phone. "You're right, honey. I'd love to make it up to both of you. How about dinner? My treat. Just the three of us." There was a long pause. Then, "Fine, but don't start acting weird again." We agreed on Friday night. That gave me 3 days. 3 days to dig into Daniel's life, his past, his lies. I started with the basics. I pulled out the old shoebox where I had kept everything from when he disappeared. The police reports, the fake addresses, the screenshots of emails, the notes I had made as I tried to track him down. My hands shook as I spread them across the kitchen table. Every word reminded me of the nights I cried myself to sleep, the collector's calls, the fear of losing my house. But I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't about my pain. This was my evidence. Then I turned to the present. I searched him online, typing in Daniel Carter, the name Hannah had used. A perfectly curated life popped up. LinkedIn full of fake achievements, Facebook with carefully staged travel photos, Instagram dripping with wealth and sophistication. He had even created a fake family background with pictures of parents who didn't exist, their images pulled from random corners of the internet. But then I spotted something. A photograph of him at a charity gala 2 years ago with a different woman on his arm. His smile was the same. Her eyes, however, looked hollow. My stomach twisted. How many women has he done this to? I called a friend, Marie, who worked at the courthouse. "Marie," I whispered, "I need a favor. Off the books. Can you look up a man named Daniel Carter? Maybe also Michael Rhodes? I think he has a history." She hesitated. "Ellen, are you in trouble again?" I closed my eyes. No, but my daughter might be. Marie promised to call back. When Friday came, I put on my best dress, painted my lips red, and forced a smile into place. If Michael thought I was the same broken woman he left behind, he'd be mistaken. Tonight, I'd start peeling back his mask. The restaurant was candlelit, cozy, romantic, the kind of place designed for whispered promises and stolen glances. Hannah beamed at him, her whole body leaning toward him like a sunflower to the sun. "Mom," she said, "you remember Daniel?" I extended my hand. "Of course." His grip was firm, warm, confident. The kind of handshake that said, "Trust me." "Ellen," he said smoothly, "it's a pleasure to finally spend time together." His eyes locked on mine, daring me to flinch, to scream his real name. But I smiled back. The evening played out like a performance. He asked about my health, my hobbies, my retirement. He laughed at my jokes. To anyone else, he was the perfect gentleman. But I knew the truth. I caught the subtle slips, the way his story about his job didn't match the timeline on his LinkedIn, the way he avoided questions about his family, deflecting with charm. At one point, Hannah excused herself to the restroom. That's when his mask slipped, just for a second. He leaned forward, his voice low. "You say one word to her, and I'll make sure she never speaks to you again. You remember what I'm capable of, Ellen." My breath caught, but I didn't blink. "I remember," I whispered back, "and that's why you should be very careful with me." He smirked, but I saw the flicker of unease. That night, when I got home, the phone rang. It was Marie. "You were right," she said grimly. "This guy's a ghost. He's been sued twice under different names, fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, but he always disappears before they can pin him. He's slippery, Ellen, dangerous." I gripped the receiver so tight, my knuckles whitened. "Thank you, Marie." When I hung up, I stared at the wall for a long time. My heart hammered, but a strange calm washed over me. He thought he was the predator, but this time, I was the hunter. And my daughter's wedding? That would be his stage for the final act. For the next week, I moved like a woman living two lives. To Hannah, I was the apologetic mother trying to accept her fiancé. But behind the scenes, I was digging, documenting, and quietly preparing for war. Daniel, wasn't going to charm me into silence this time. The first seed of doubt, I decided, had to come from Hannah herself. I knew if I attacked him directly, she'd just get defensive. She was in love, and love makes people blind. But if I nudged her just enough, maybe she'd start noticing the cracks in his mask. So one evening, I invited Hannah over for tea. I baked her favorite, lemon pound cake, the one I used to make when she was little. She came humming happily, showing me photos on her phone of floral arrangements and cake designs for the wedding. I let her ramble, then leaned in gently. "Sweetheart, you know I'll support you no matter what, but tell me, doesn't it worry you marrying someone whose past you know so little about?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "Well," I said, cutting into the cake, "he seems lovely, but he doesn't talk much about his family, or his childhood, or even his old friends. That's unusual, isn't it?" She frowned. "He told me his parents died when he was young." "Yes," I said softly, "but you've never seen a photo of them, or met anyone from his past. Don't you find that strange?" Her fork paused midair. I could see the gears turning, but then she shook her head. "He doesn't like talking about it, Mom. Not everyone wears their past on their sleeve." I nodded, letting it go. I didn't want to push too hard, but I saw it, the tiniest crack in her certainty. Later that night, when she left,
I slipped into my office and started a file. Every piece of evidence Marie had dug up, every inconsistency I had spotted, screenshots, names, dates, places. I wasn't just going to confront him, I was going to expose him so thoroughly that Hannah couldn't deny it. But Daniel wasn't making it easy. The next time we crossed paths, it was at Hannah's apartment. She had invited me for dinner, and he was there, cooking like the perfect son-in-law. Garlic sizzling in the pan, glasses polished, jazz music humming in the background. "Mrs. Smith," he said smoothly, handing me a glass of Cabernet, "I'm so glad we're getting to know each other. Family means everything to me." I nearly choked on the irony. Family meant money to him. Family meant targets. Throughout the evening, he played the doting fiancé, but I watched closely, and sure enough, I caught it again, his mask slipping. When Hannah went to grab dessert, his voice dropped low, just for me. "Still playing detective, Ellen? Careful. You wouldn't want Hannah thinking you're paranoid. It would be such a shame if she stopped inviting you over." My stomach turned cold, but I didn't let him see it. Instead, I smiled sweetly. "You're right, Daniel, or should I say Michael, or is it David these days? It's hard to keep track of your little identities." For the first time, his expression faltered, just for a second, but that second was enough. The next morning, I called Marie again. "Can you find me every alias he's used? I want a full list, and court documents if possible." Marie sighed. "Ellen, this is dangerous. Men like him don't just con, they ruin lives. If he realizes what you're doing—" "I know," I interrupted firmly, "but my daughter's life is worth the risk." By Friday, I had a stack of documents thick enough to make my blood boil. Lawsuits, eviction notices, complaints from other women. He'd drained one woman's inheritance, another's retirement account. Each time he vanished before the law could catch up. And now he had his claws in Hannah. That weekend, I decided to test something. I called Hannah and said, "Sweetheart, I was going through some old photos of your dad, and I thought Daniel might like to see them. Does he ever show you pictures of his family?" Silence. Finally, she said, "No, Mom, but that's because his past was painful. I told you." Her voice had a defensive edge, but beneath it, doubt. So I pushed just a little. "I understand, but you know, real love can survive honesty. Secrets, not so much." She hung up soon after, clearly upset. But I wasn't discouraged. Seeds of doubt take time to grow. That night, I sat alone in the crumbling lake house that had once been my husband's pride and joy. I thought about how much he would hate this, seeing our daughter fall for a predator. I whispered into the empty room, "Don't worry, Robert, I'll protect her. I'll end this." Then I got an idea. If Hannah wouldn't believe me, maybe the world would. Daniel thrived in shadows, in lies, in whispered promises. What if I dragged him into the light? I pulled out my phone and started recording myself, speaking calmly, clearly, as though telling a story. I laid out the facts of who Daniel really was, how he had ruined me, how he had dozens of identities. I didn't say his name yet, not until I was ready, but I recorded everything. Because when the moment came, I wanted proof. I wanted a weapon. And the perfect stage for that weapon was approaching fast. The wedding. As I set my phone down, a notification buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Ellen, or you'll regret it." My hands went cold. He knew. But instead of fear, I felt something stronger rising in my chest. Anger. Righteous, burning anger. If he wanted war, he'd get it. The text message haunted me all night. "Stop digging, Ellen, or you'll regret it." I stared at those words until my phone screen dimmed, replaying them in my mind like a drumbeat.
For a moment, the fear was overwhelming. Daniel knew I was investigating him. He had eyes on me, maybe even people watching me. What if he tried to hurt me? But then I remembered Hannah's face, the way she defended him, the way she looked at him like he was her whole future. That's when fear turned to fuel. If I gave up now, she'd lose everything. By morning, I was ready. I drove to Marie's office, clutching the folder of documents like a weapon. Marie looked at me with wide eyes as I placed it on her desk. "He's on to me," I admitted, "but I can't stop now. I need more. Bank records, financial accounts, anything tying him to fraud." Marie hesitated. "Ellen, this isn't just risky anymore. It's dangerous." But she leaned closer. "If you're really ready to bring him down, I know someone who can help. A former client, a journalist who covers financial crimes. She's ruthless, and once she gets her hands on a story," her lips curved into a sly smile, "it doesn't stay hidden." I felt a flicker of hope. A journalist could shine the light I needed. "I introduce us," I said firmly. 2 days later, I was sitting in a quiet cafe with a woman named Claudia. Sharp eyes, notepad ready, voice calm but cutting. "So," she said, sipping her coffee, "you're telling me your daughter is marrying a career con artist?" I slid the folder across the table. "I'm not telling you. I'm showing you." She flipped through the documents, her expression hardening. Identity fraud, bankruptcy scams, inheritance theft. My God, this guy is a walking crime story. "Can you help me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes met mine, unflinching. "Mrs. Smith, not only can I help you, I can bury him." That night, I finally slept. But Daniel wasn't sleeping. The next morning, Hannah called, her voice shaky. "Mom, Daniel said you're trying to ruin our wedding. He said you've been digging into his past, spreading lies." My throat tightened. "And what do you think, sweetheart?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but he said if I don't cut you off, we won't make it to the altar. He's furious." My chest ached. He was isolating her, just like he had isolated me years ago. I could lose her completely if I pushed too hard. But I couldn't stop. Not now. "Listen to me, Hannah. I know you love him, but love doesn't ask you to abandon your family. Love doesn't demand silence. Please, just keep your eyes open." She hung up without answering. I sat in silence for hours, the weight of her doubt crushing me. Was I making it worse? Was I driving her further into his arms? Then the phone buzzed again, a message from Claudia. "Meet me tomorrow. I've got something big." When I arrived, Claudia had a smug grin and a manila envelope. She slid it across the table. Inside were bank statements showing large sums of money transferred into accounts under Daniel's latest alias, money drained from women he'd dated, women just like Hannah. But the smoking gun was a photo, a grainy image of Daniel at a courthouse, arm in arm with another woman less than 2 years ago. Married. I gasped. He's already married? Separated, technically, but never divorced, which makes your daughter his next bigamy victim. My blood boiled. That was it. That was the nail in his coffin. The wedding was only 2 weeks away. If Hannah wouldn't listen to me, then I'd make sure everyone else heard the truth. I began to plan. Step 1, make sure I got an invitation, even if it wasn't willingly given. I called Hannah and asked if I could at least attend the ceremony quietly, as her mother. Her sigh was heavy, but eventually she said, "Fine, Mom, but no drama. Promise me." I promised, but inside, I knew there would be drama. Step 2, prepare the evidence.
I scanned every document, every photo, every court record. I compiled it into a presentation, yes, an actual slideshow, ready to project. Step 3, timing. I wouldn't ruin the rehearsal. I wouldn't sabotage the preparations. No, I'd wait for the moment Daniel thought he had everything, when the vows were about to bind Hannah to him forever. That's when I would strike. But Daniel wasn't stupid. He sensed my defiance. One night, as I left the grocery store, a car screeched beside me. The window rolled down, and there he was, smiling coldly. You really don't learn, do you, Ellen? You interfere again, and you'll regret it more than you already have. My hands shook, but I forced my chin up. You ruined me once, but you will not ruin my daughter. He smirked. We'll see about that. Then the car sped away. I stood in the parking lot, heart racing, but something had shifted. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was enraged. This wasn't only about Hannah. This was about me reclaiming the years he had stolen, the dignity, the peace, the trust. So when the wedding day dawned, bright and beautiful, I put on my best dress, pinned up my hair, and carried a small black folder tucked in my purse. Inside was the truth. And when I walked into that beachside venue, guests turning to look, and Hannah's tense smile meeting mine, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to end Daniel.
The ocean breeze carried salt and music as guests filed into their chairs. White flowers arched over the altar, and Hannah, radiant in lace, clutched her bouquet with trembling hands. But my eyes weren't on her. They were on Daniel, standing tall, smug, handsome as ever, as if nothing could touch him. He smiled when he saw me slip quietly into the back row, but it wasn't warmth. It was a warning. I ignored it. The officiant began. Words floated through the air. Gathered here today, vows of love, forever bound. Guests sighed, dabbed at tears, whispered admiration. And then came the moment. Do you, Daniel? My hand tightened around the folder in my purse. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Take Hannah. I rose from my seat. The whispering started immediately. Hannah's eyes widened, confusion flashing across her face. Daniel's jaw clenched. To be your lawfully wedded wife. I object. The words cut through the ceremony like a blade. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. The officiant froze. Daniel's smile faltered, then returned, slick and unbothered. Mrs. Smith, this isn't the time. But I didn't give him the chance. I strode down the aisle, heels clicking against the wooden deck. No, Daniel, this is exactly the time. From my purse, I pulled the folder. My fingers didn't shake as I opened it, one page after another flashing in the sunlight. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the man about to marry my daughter, a man who has left a trail of fraud, theft, and broken lives behind him. Gasps turned to murmurs, and murmurs into outrage. I held up the photo, grainy but clear enough. Daniel, hand in hand with another woman, at a courthouse. This is Daniel and his current wife. That's right, he's still married, planning to make my daughter his next bigamy victim. Chaos erupted. Guests leaned forward, whispering furiously. Phones came out, snapping pictures of the documents I laid on the altar. The officiant looked horrified. Hannah stood frozen, bouquet slipping from her fingers. Daniel? She whispered. His mask cracked. For the first time, panic flickered in his eyes. Sweetheart, she's lying.
Am I? I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. Because here are the bank transfers. Here are the accounts. Here are the names of the women before Hannah, the ones you bled dry. I turned to the guests. He's not marrying her for love. He's marrying her for her inheritance, just like he's done before.
Daniel lunged forward, trying to grab the papers, but two groomsmen stepped in front of him, blocking his path. And then Claudia, the journalist, stepped out from the crowd, camera flashing. "Smile, Daniel," she said coldly. "This will be front page by morning." The look on his face, rage, fear, humiliation, was everything I'd waited years to see. Hannah's knees buckled. Her best friend caught her just before she collapsed. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me, not with anger, but with dawning horror. "Mom, you were right," she choked. I nodded softly, my heart breaking for her, but also swelling with relief. "I wish I wasn't, sweetheart, but I couldn't let him ruin you like he ruined me." Security arrived within minutes. Daniel fought, cursed, shouted threats, but it was useless. The police, already tipped off by Claudia, were waiting outside. They put him in cuffs right there, in front of everyone. The wedding was over, but the story wasn't. That night, Hannah sat on my couch, her makeup streaked from crying, her engagement ring lying discarded on the table between us. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked, her voice raw. "I tried," I whispered, "but you weren't ready to hear it. You had to see for yourself." She leaned against me, like she hadn't done since she was a child. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I doubted you." I stroked her hair, tears sliding down my cheeks. "You don't have to be sorry. You just have to be safe." For the first time in years, I felt peace. Weeks later, Daniel's face was plastered across newspapers and TV screens, serial con man exposed at his own wedding. Claudia's story went viral. Women from across the country came forward, sharing their experiences, their scars. Together they built a case so airtight, Daniel didn't stand a chance. Hannah testified, so did I. The judge's gavel came down with finality. 15 years in prison. As Daniel was led away in shackles, he turned once to glare at me, but I didn't flinch. Because for the first time, I wasn't the grieving widow he had once broken. I was the mother who had fought back, and I had won. Months later, Hannah and I sat in the garden of the little lake house I'd restored, drinking tea under the shade of the oak tree. She smiled more these days, her laughter brighter, her eyes no longer clouded. "Do you ever regret it, Mom? Speaking up? Exposing him the way you did?" I looked at her, at the strength she was finding again, and shook my head. No, because silence is what men like Daniel count on. And this time, I refused to be silent. The sun dipped lower, casting the lake in gold. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. Because I hadn't just saved my daughter, I had saved myself.